And joining us now here on Market Talk, he is the Business Growth Director of Agriculture with Osborn Barr Paramore OBP. Richard Fordyce is with us. Richard, great to catch up with you again, sir. How are you?
I am great, Jesse. It is good to catch up with you again. And, I guess I don't know, there's always something to talk about, right? In this industry. So yeah, great to see you again.
There is always something to talk about, and I have a few things in mind to talk about with you here today, Richard. I think first, I know you were recently on a panel at NCGA's Corn Congress in DC discussing the Farm Bill. I believe you were on that with Dan Glickman and Heidi Heitkamp. Obviously, Farm Bill discussions, they are ongoing. There's a lot of talk. We're seeing all the various commodity organizations and livestock groups, et cetera, coming out with their priorities for the Farm Bill. Talk about that panel. What did you hear from everyone at Corn Congress, and what was your takeaway from that panel?
Yeah, the Farm Bill is such a big piece of legislation. If it's when I was the administrator, I actually had the book because I had to reference it every day. But it's almost 900 pages long if it's printed in book form. And so, when you think about Title I, which is the commodity title, all the way down to Title 12, which is the miscellaneous title, things that don't fit other places go in there. There are a lot of issues. The nutrition title is, depending on the year, can be 80 to almost 90% of the funding for the Farm Bill goes through the nutrition title, which obviously provides a lot of great and truly life-saving, food for folks. It's also a part of the school nutrition program. So, obviously very important there as well. But from the corn growers' perspective, certainly, crop insurance is a key element for them, to continue. Certainly don't carve away anything out of crop insurance and maybe make it more robust. Some of the things that have been discussed is making some of the crop insurance products a bit more nimble, right? So that a farmer can respond to a market trend, for example. Is there a chance to, as an example, right now, we're seeing some really, I think, attractive prices in wheat. In my part of the world, we haven't grown wheat here for 15 years. And so does it make sense? And can you insure a wheat crop followed by a double crop soybean crop the next year? And I think just talking to people, rank and file farmers around the country, I think there's a lot of people that are at least looking at planting wheat who haven't planted wheat for a long time, not only to take advantage of that market. And that sounds kind of cold and calloused, but there is a shortage of wheat. And, with what's going on in the Ukraine, is there an opportunity for American farmers to pick up that slack and be able to provide some of that, much needed grain in certain parts of the world that really are needing it because they've lost that Ukrainian market. So I think definitely flexibility in crop insurance. Certainly, if any of us have been paying attention, not only through the Biden administration's priorities, but I think we're hearing it now more from commodity groups and other farm organizations and some members of Congress looking at climate smart agriculture and how can programs, maybe in the conservation title or other, maybe the commodity title, how can they, move nuance a bit to help support, encourage farmers to implement even more climate smart agricultural practices. We know the science is there in a lot of areas, to be able to adopt those kinds of things. But what will the Farm Bill do to even help move that a little bit farther forward? So I think that's certainly interesting. I've even heard mention of something on the crop side from a safety net program that would kind of resemble the dairy margin coverage program,
Okay.
where farmers are actually buying a premium through USDA, and it likely would happen through Farm Service Agency, where you insure against a margin. So we're seeing historically high prices, but we're seeing historically high inputs as well. And so, is there an appetite, to include something like that? So maybe you modify the ARC and the PLC programs or something to include some sort of a margin protection program of some kind. I've not seen or heard anything that anyone's put on paper yet, but those are some things that certainly I've heard. And then finally, Jesse, I know probably talking a little too much about that, but the message that I heard, at National Corn Congress was that whether it's corn growers, soybean growers, cotton, whatever the case is that collaboration and partnership is going to be really important. The more people, the more organizations, and the more perspectives that we can get that are aligned on whatever the issue is, the easier it's going to be to get some movement on that. So, just partnering and collaboration where we can do that, where it makes sense and where folks agree, to move some of these major issues forward, hopefully sooner and less painfully.
Well, Richard, a lot of stuff definitely we're keeping our eyes on with the Farm Bill moving forward. And I'm sure as well, while you were at Corn Congress and as you talk to farmers around the country, you might be hearing about the drought and some of this persistent heat that we've seen, especially across the Western Corn Belt, Western Plains. We've seen the crop ratings start to take a hit on the corn side and some of beans as well. But I know that there's a lot of worry when it comes to how this heat is shaping up, especially with more heat on the books here. It looks like for the month of August. So what are you hearing from growers in some of those areas that have really been affected by the heat and dryness?
Yeah. Again, another really relevant topic of conversation. And it's really, I look at the drought. I mean, full disclosure, we have a pretty good looking crop here. We've caught some rains. But just for my time, serving as administrator, it's one of those things. It's kind of like brushing your teeth. I look at the crop progress and condition report, and when it comes out each week, and then certainly the drought monitor. And some areas did receive some meaningful rainfall that had been extremely dry here in the last few days. But there are still areas where those shades of red are getting darker. And talking to growers in probably 2 or 3 different states that are impacted, soybean. So for example, let's just do soybeans and corn. Soybeans are a pretty resilient plant. They can a lot of times hang on. You're going to see a decline in final yield, but if you get a rain at some point before they've died, you're going to have a crop, right? It may not be what you had anticipated or what you'd expected when you put that seed in the ground, but corn is so determinate when different stages of that plant is maturing, that if you're in a stressful situation, for example, at pollination, it's hot, it's dry, that's going to just knock the daylights out of that yield. And so I was actually, you and I were visiting here before we started the show, and I had traveled from my home here in Northwest Missouri. I traveled down to Central Missouri, and kind of that I-70 corridor, like a county north, a county south, has been hot and it has been dry. And we saw corn last Saturday on the way down. We saw corn that looked like the tops of pineapples and was just about that color before it starts to turn gray. So my wife was traveling with me. I said, that corn is done. Like, it's not, there'll be no yield there. Well, they got rain on Sunday or Monday. It had cooled off, dropped about 25 degrees. We were traveling home yesterday, and that corn looked pretty resilient. Like, it looked a lot better. What that'll ultimately do to yield, I don't know. But I've talked to growers and farmers in Kansas, some in Nebraska, and some of the same stories where you see those colors on the drought monitor. And just one final thing on that, Jesse, it is so darned disheartening when you have put all this research and all this effort and all this time in planting that crop, and just because of your geographic location, you're not getting rain. You go up the highway 10 miles and they are getting rain. Their crop's green and lush and yours is burning up. I've been there before, and I'm telling you, that is a very disheartening, disappointing, helpless feeling. And so I know, and you know, some of the guys that I visited with, I've certainly said, hey, I feel for you. Like this is not, it's not good. It's certainly not what you want. But it is, you know, if the whole darn country's dry, everybody's dry. But when it's not, there are people that, you know, nothing they didn't do a better job managing are going to have a crop and somebody's not. It's not a good thing.
No, definitely is not a good thing. Richard, let's turn our attention. You mentioned Ukraine earlier, the Black Sea. Since the last time you and I talked, we had this deal signed, whether it was one deal, concurrent deals, you know, there so a little bit of smoke and mirrors, it felt like, to everything, but with Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, and the United Nations to get grain exports out of Ukraine, you know, and then a day after signing it, we have Russian missiles hitting Odessa, hitting the port of Odessa. Sounding like that some of these ships are going to make it out, but there's still just, it feels like a lot of uncertainty to this entire situation and just how much grain will get out of the ports that's been sitting there for quite some time now.
Yeah, you know, your guess is as good as mine. I honestly, when I heard the agreement, I thought, well, you know, that's good, right? Because, you know, there are export destinations for that grain, you know, Africa, the Middle East, other places where they've been waiting on this, right? Like there are animals that are going hungry. There are people that are going hungry, relying on these grain shipments out of, you know, the port of Odessa is one of, I think, 3 or 4 ports, but super high volume port. They had an agreement. I was actually reading something about it where they needed an escort vessel. So the vessels that came in needed to be inspected to make sure they weren't bringing in, you know, weapons or something to support the war effort for the Ukrainians. They had they would have a lead vessel that would lead the ships into the port and then take them back out once they were loaded. And so I think they were ready to go. And then, you know, 2 missiles, I think it was 2 missiles hit the infrastructure at the port of Odessa. Now they didn't, at least from what I understand, they did not hit the silos. So that grain's still at the port, and there has been some movement. I think that missile attack was Saturday, maybe. And so I think there's movement again, but it's incredibly frustrating. Well, it's more than that, and I could use other words, but we can't on this show. When Russia had agreed to allow those exports to leave, and it just seems sinister and evil that you sign an agreement, and I think they signed it on Friday, and then 2 missiles hit the infrastructure of that port on Saturday. That's pretty that's disingenuous at the very least, and, you know, probably potentially could have been planned, you know, before they even signed the agreement. So, you know, my hope is that there will be opportunities to start bringing some of that grain out. But, and I think we talked about this on a previous episode. That's last year's production, right? So, you know, Ukrainian farmers, they weren't super motivated to go plant when there were tanks rolling across their field. And so just the production in that highly productive area, you know, that is the breadbasket of the world. We think it's here, but that's the original breadbasket of the world. And, you know, so production, and I've seen estimates, is going to be 30-40% off just because they aren't able to plant or didn't plant, or there was damage after they planted. So there's going to be long-term effects there. And I hope, and honestly hope and pray, that they can figure out some way to start moving some of that production, some of that grain out of there into those markets that truly, truly need it.
Definitely. Well, and we have seen some risk premium put back into the markets as well here on the Chicago board with the weather and the Ukraine situation. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of things we need to watch there. I want to turn our attention to inflation and recession, Richard. Obviously, that continues to be a hot topic in the markets, in the news, in agriculture in rural America. We're feeling the pinch. A lot of folks are wondering what the end is going to be like here. Will there be a soft landing or not? Most don't think there's going to be a soft landing to the economy here. And we are technically officially in a recession now with 2 straight quarters of negative GDP growth, interest rate hikes as expected from the Fed. But as you look at everything as a whole, and you talk to farmers and folks across rural America, I know that inflation and recession, this is stinging a lot of folks, and it's a big worry, especially in agriculture right now.
No, you're right. And at least in this part of the world, we're seeing a little bit of relief in the energy prices. So gasoline, diesel fuel's coming down a little bit, but it's still whatever. I think road diesel here yesterday I think was 480.
Hmm.
When it had been over $5. So energy prices certainly directly affect just everything we do in agriculture, right? Whether that's fertilizer production all the way to actual farming, right? And then obviously we'll have issues this fall, when folks are wanting to dry corn and that sort of thing. So that's taken a bite out of potential profits. And then these interest rate hikes. If you've got a long-term debt that's a real estate debt, for example, that's probably a fixed rate, where that rate was bought, maybe in a secondary market or something that you're not going to see any movement there. But gosh, any kind of input, financing, operating line of credit, short-term loans, maybe, again, for equipment or capital purchases. I mean, if you add 2 or 3 points on some of these loans, the amounts of some of these loans, that's real money. And so, I think there's certainly some nervousness there. Where are these interest rates headed? I'm a product of the farm crisis. My first crop was 1983. My first operating loan was 19%, and I wanted to be a farmer. Believe it or not. I do think that's the case. Who knows where inputs are going? We could see a reversal before some of this crop input, activity is happening. I don't know where it's headed, right? So when the things that either that input suppliers either have to buy as far as ingredients or to transport, these types of inputs, or just frankly just to manufacture them, it's cost. So let's leave everything the same. They probably have some sort of a line of credit, but they also rely on energy a great deal as well. And so just everything being the same, those things will cost more next year because of those components that go into that, all of the things that they need to do to create those, manufacture those inputs. So I don't know. I don't know what to think. I'm a little nervous about what. I mean, we thought we had input issues this year. All spring, talking to folks, we thought there was going to be a problem with inputs for the 2022 growing season. Most growers had already either booked it, paid for it, maybe even had it in their warehouses. They were worried about 23. I think I am too.
And I think that I will echo that sentiment with you. I think I'm one of the folks who is worried about 23 as well. Richard, great stuff as always. Before we wrap it up, I'll kind of open the floor to you. Anything else you wanna hit on or touch on that we haven't here today?
Jesse, you do such a great job of guiding us through our conversation. I don't necessarily, other than, I don't think there's any more noble pursuit than the pursuit of growing food, right? So, America's farmers, and the people that support America's farmers, by golly, we just talked about inputs and inflation, recession. Farmers are still going to be here. They might not have as big a smile on their face, but they're still going to be here. And I am just as proud as I can be to be associated with this industry, to be a farmer. And then also, my work with Osborn Barr Paramore, where we tell the good story of agriculture. That's what we do every day for our clients. And it's just, you can't find finer people than the people that are engaged in agriculture. So.
Well, with that, we will wrap it up. Business Growth Director of Agriculture with Osborn Barr Paramore, Richard Fordyce. Always a pleasure, sir. We'll talk to you again real soon. Have a great one.
All right. Thanks, Jesse. You too.